Here's what we do know. About 80% of the active ingredients, the different components of a drug, about 80% of those come from abroad, and the overwhelming majority of that 80% are manufactured in China. So the drug may ultimately be assembled here, but all the components of it, we rely on China. About 80% of the active ingredients, the different components of a drug, about 80% of those come from abroad, and the overwhelming majority of that 80% are manufactured in China. So the drug may ultimately be assembled here, but all the components of it, we rely on China for it. So just as an example, a few years ago, there was an explosion at a laboratory in China, and it disrupted the global supply of certain antibiotics. So these are not just COVID-19, coronavirus drugs we're talking about here. We're talking about things people use on a daily basis, especially generics. And that is because we allowed offshoring for years.
And also they threatened on March 5th through their that they were going to hold back those drugs. They don't like the fact that we're blaming them for what they did, and that's launched this virus on the whole world.
Yeah. Their official newspaper, the Communist Party, wrote an op-ed basically mocking the United States, saying you should be thanking us, you should be apologizing to us. If we cut you off from your drugs, you guys would fall off the cliff and go into some inferno. I forgot the language they use now. They actually specifically singled out Florida as part of it. So what it tells you is that they realize that in a moment of crisis, let's say the US and China have a showdown over something, and they can threaten to cut us off of our pharmaceutical supplies, they could trigger a domestic problem here that would make it difficult for us to confront them. It's a tremendous amount of leverage. So we need to invest and make available investments and flow investments into rebuilding that capacity in places where we have critical shortages, not just pharmaceuticals, but rare earth minerals all across the board. It's good jobs for Americans, and it's good for our national security and economic security.
And the president hears you. He's going to look to the executive order on the Buy American Act. I'm going to look for that, Senator. We're going to have you back. We're going to stay on top of this even when we beat this virus.
Number one is we've got to create demand for domestic production of these basic active ingredients and or diversify our supply chain so it's not coming out of one province in one country that, as you point out last week, through the official newspaper of the Communist Party, threatened to cut us off and kill Americans by cutting us off of these basic ingredients that are used in the medicine. And that's what we know just on the ingredient piece. There are other developed medicines that may come from another country, not China, but their active ingredients are also from there. So we've got to create demand. Number one, the Department of Defense should have to be required to build a stockpile of essential medicines. We should bring back the Buy American preferences in the Department of Defense and the Veterans Administration. All of that creates demands for domestic production. Well, there's a great disconnect between reality and what people up here in Washington and the media and in political circles talk about. The notion that because you're a Hispanic and your parents or you are an immigrant, you are in favor of illegal immigration is absurd. The overwhelming majority of Hispanics in this country are either legal immigrants or the descendants of legal immigrants. And they themselves appreciate and understand how important it is for a country to be able to protect its processes.